Good afternoon again, sports fans. Here we are back with the AD Vantage Point podcast. Once again, coming to you live from the bunker. We're back in the bunker because there's no better place to be at this time of year than in the bunker. But it is a beautiful day out here on Long Island. And we've got an extra special guest with us today. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce not only a great AD, but now an even better business person, um, assistant superintendent. I'm not sure if they actually gave that title yet.
Oh, I'm the retired guy who came back as an assistant operations administrator.
We know the feeling. We know the feeling. But those of you on Long Island obviously know the name Charlie Delargy. Charlie was one of our ADs in Section 11 down here, and then jumped back and forth between some business jobs. But just want to welcome you, Charlie. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about where you came from, what you've done, why you're doing what you're doing now, aside from the fact that it's a great job.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Jim. Well, I've known Jim probably it's got to be a little bit over 2 decades now. Started out, Brooklyn born, so you're always from Brooklyn. So I stayed in there till my 20s. Started teaching in the New York City schools, came out. I've held roles as athletic director, assistant principal, dean, athletic director, assistant soup for business, assistant soup for human resources. Crazy enough to be an acting superintendent for a while, and consultant with different groups. And now I'm out in the Mattituck-Cutchogue School District, it's beautiful. Driving east, all you need is a good pair of sunglasses, and avoid pumpkin picking and wine tasting on Saturdays and Sundays. So you just come here Monday through Friday.
So a lot of people don't know the nice thing about the North Fork is there's actually two roads on the North Fork. So you can go the North Road, or you can go 25 to get back and forth. But yeah, there's a lot of pumpkins on the North Road, so you don't want to take that. So, you know, I guess the first thing I want to ask you, Charlie, is why leave the athletic director role and go into the business role?
Um, well, the part was I always had an interest. I was always, like the way I said, an idiot savant with numbers, a plain idiot with everything else. But really love the makeup of the finances of the district, how you could utilize the monies better, spread them out further to really help students, because that's really what you're in the business of. Saw too much of, generic ways that people are handling things. So really got involved with that, and had an interest and thought this would be the next step.
And going back into your AD role before you got into the business role, and you were handed a budget to take care of. Here it is, November. You're a new AD, first time out of the blocks. How much training did they give you on how to manage a budget?
Well,
It's
they
rhetorical.
basically you started hearing words like rollover, and then you started, instead of thinking that you were a puppy on the ground flipping back and forth, which that I think that's what kind of started with some of the things as a new AD. Really the numbers stayed the same from one budget that I had. And then as time went on, we started getting onto what was called zero-based budgeting, where you had to account for anything and everything that you do instead of just taking the monies that you had from one year going to the next. But, really, there wasn't much out there unless you developed a great relationship with your business official. And when I was at Hop Hog, I will tell you, I had a man by the name of Steve Billick, who phenomenal assistant superintendent for business, did interim work everywhere, tons of places. But he was one that I actually wanted to learn more from and help me through the entire process.
It, the fact that you mentioned one of the perfect words, we talk about this all the time. In fact, our aspiring AD program, we spend a great amount of time on relationships. And how did you foster that relationship with your business person?
I think maybe the first time it went with Steve, I said, Steve gave me a whole bunch of numbers. What the hell is going on? And he actually turned me into there's like an accounting book that's the use of universal codes that you have. And it's really just reading. and understanding. And that's what it really took. And then I looked at, the one thing I looked at was the prior year expenses. I looked at the last 3 years. He gave me the information on what the school district spent their money on and then how it worked in codes. Because at first it was just numbers. And I'll, help out a little bit by going into what budget codes mean, what the numbers mean. And then we drilled it down to find out exactly what was purchased. So we had the program, whether it's finance manager, which is now Envision, or something like that, where you could really see what the expenses were.
So jumping from, your AD role into the business role, the ADs that worked under you, did they come in with any kind of great knowledge of how to run their budget, or were you able to mentor them a little bit?
Well, we had a little fun. It's like, I worked with, well, there's a couple of great athletic directors that I work with. I had Bob McIntyre over in South Country Schools, which is Bellport. So we had a great time. And Bobby's reaction was when they talked about teams and they goes, I got Charlie as a business guy. So we're good. But Bob was a really good person who became a student of the game on figuring that out. Mark D'Antuono was with me up in Locust Valley, who also was very knowledgeable as it related to what the finances were. And then here where I am, I've got another veteran athletic director, Greg Wormuth, who is great at knowing the players and knowing the system. And I think that really ties in to what you're talking about. What I always try doing as a business official is the athletic directors are the resource that know the district the best. They know what's going to work. They know what is not going to work. They know where they can go on with addition of teams, subtraction of teams. They really know the environment, combining teams. And then from there, the money side is what I'm supposed to know. So that's where in the conversation, I'm getting involved with them about what we can do and how we can make the numbers work so that you get what you want within the constraints of a budget during a tax levy cap season.
Yeah, which we've been in for quite a while, and it looks like we're staying in. It's funny what not that this isn't related to athletics, but I'm reading the electric bus energy proposal that they have, and one of the recommendations is that in order to pay for all this, that you attempt to pierce the cap. That you should try to
Yeah,
pierce the cap. Yeah.
yeah, I think, they've done, you've had to give electrification studies, and I think there might be a little bit of a better understanding once they look at all that information. Now that you have congestion pricing coming back in New York
I
State, you might see a little bit of a push off on the electrification of buses
Yeah,
to
we
a
talked about
later
that the
time.
other day.
Yeah,
But that's not the discussion now. But
no,
it actually does come into play with athletics because, again, you also have to deal with transportation in your athletic budget of figuring out who's and what and where. But it's not just the money; it's can the bus actually get there and back? If Whitman is playing Mattituck in a game, are they going to make it back, or do you have a charging station for me once I get there? Kind of thing. So.
I was kidding around because one of the places I used to be an athletic director at was Hop Hog. So I said maybe there could be a rental fee for Hop Hog being the hub for everybody. So, Mr. Butler can make even more on rental fees if you're using that gym.
Oh, don't
But
take my
yeah,
for
it's
the
interesting
entrepreneur.
stuff. But it's just a piece.
So getting back to the AD thing and a new AD, and this is really where we're working with these guys that have been on the job for 1, 2, 3 years. To me,
Mhm.
in today's world, you're a new AD until you get tenure.
Yeah.
But what would be the first thing you would have a discussion with relating to a new AD in budget time?
Well, I think usually what's going to happen is your numbers from year to year. Like I use the term rollover. I don't like a rollover budget because it's just the exact same number. But if you're doing zero base budgeting where you got to account for everything, you would like to do something like that, but consider the concept of rollover, where you're getting that $150,000 in your budget. You're getting that 225,000. You're getting that 60,000 in your budget, where you're going to have to make it work with officials fees, state fees, section fees, and then with equipment, uniform, and that. So I would say when you're trying to look, you want to come at a number close to what's been used in the past. And then I would say that the next thing you want to look at is where are your dire needs? I always said, the big part that I was always about is the place has got to look good. The better the place looks, the better the students look, everything about it, they take far more pride in it. So we were big about, it's stamping your brand. Um, so I would say, how can you put monies towards those things? Come up with a 5-year plan as it is for uniforms. Your uniforms, if you're getting, I went to a place, they had like 15 years out of a uniform. That's nice. And the uniforms actually, maybe during that time, because it was back in the 1900s when I started. So those uniforms actually did last long. But you want to look at being more up to date. So you come up with a plan on what teams you're going to switch the uniforms out for. And you get a basic number. We all know the idea of what the cost is going to be. And you plan it on, here's where the new uniforms are coming each year. And you have that marked out for 5 years. You also do that in the way of equipment. If you need major equipment, then that's something that you're not putting as a one-time expense. Or if they want to do a capital project that includes a fitness center, that's a different story. But if you're looking at other pieces of equipment like your soccer goals or your field goal post or different things, your hurdles that you want, your pits that you're coming, like major type of renovations, or I should say like your pole vaulting mats or any of that, you plan that out over the course of time. So I'll let you jump in, Jim.
Yeah, no, so you brought up a good point about the supplies and equipment. So people don't know the difference, and there is a difference between supplies and equipment.
Massive. Yeah.
We use equipment as a generic word like for soccer goals, but it really may fall into the supply category. Can you tell us why that happens?
Sure. Well, the one thing that I'd recommend to new athletic directors is each school district has what's called a threshold on supply money and equipment money. So in some districts, if an item, just one item, not the total of everything being purchased, but if one item costs over $500, it is considered a piece of equipment. Other districts might have a threshold of $1,000. And if that one item costs more than $1,000, it's equipment, not a supply. Now, the reason why it's important is I'll go into budget codes if you don't mind, just for
No, I want
uh,
you to.
when you go over, people vote on what's called the school district budget. That's the A budget. All right, that's the one we all know about. There's also different budgets in a school district that only the business official really should be worried about. Those are like C, F, and H. That's cafeteria, federal funds, and then H is a capital project. But you're always working just on the A funds. After the letter A, which sometimes you don't even see that letter, there's 4 numbers that come up. And as it relates to athletics, you're going to see the number 2855. All right. That is a universal code that is throughout the state. So they have what's called universal codes because when auditors or that look, they want to be able to pull that information from the 700 plus school districts that you have in New York State. So that's your next set of numbers. So for athletics, you're usually 2855. Another one, if you're doing phys ed, sometimes they couple it in with athletics. Other places normally keep it separate. That'll be what's called in your 2-1 codes. So you might see it 2110, or if you're doing health, you might see 2133, or anything like that. It starts with a 2-1. That's what you do. So that's really your phys ed and your health. The other part, if you have nurses, and if you have nurses, I wish you all the best of luck to switch them over to the people personnel director. But if you do have nurses, you'll see those codes. They start with a 2815. All right. Your second set of numbers after that is there's where we're talking about with the equipment. Anything that starts with a one, those are salaries, like your coach's salaries are in there. Anything that starts with a two, 200, those are equipment codes. And it's very important to come back. Anything that starts with a four, anything that starts with a three, you worry because there are no threes. All right. But anything that starts with a four, those are your contract services. And depending on places, you will have your supplies in either a 450 code, or other places they go to what's called the fives, they go to a 501 code, right? They're all the same. Fours and fives are very good friends. When you do what's called a budget transfer, you could do that. Equipment, which are known as like one-time expenses, those are the 200s. They're not friends with anybody. You can't put money into those 200s, and you can't take money out of the 200s to put into your 400s. All right. And equipment is one of the things that you're concerned about, because there are rules against equipment if you ever went into what's called a contingency budget. You know, those are scary numbers. And I don't want to get in, you're getting a little too much gibberish, and an AD's going to start going, oh God, I don't want.
Yeah, no, I don't want to see a scene from Scanners where everybody's heads explode, you know.
Yeah,
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 but you know, the 200 code, you bring up a great point about 200 code. And I think one of the things I learned when I first became an AD was this is the code that the taxpayers vote on, and they have an expectation to see that major item purchased. So if
yeah.
we're if we put a, I don't know, for the, you know, say a gator to drag the field, that's $10,000, that item, we should see that July 1 when the budget comes through. But can we, the question I'd have is, let's say we found a gator for $9,000, can we buy that gator?
Oh, you had $10,000 in that?
We had 10,000 in code, can we not spend that whole 10,000 and buy a similar
Absolutely.
item?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
By all means, you definitely would, you definitely purchase that. You're going to go through what's called quotes, because everybody's going to have to get three quotes. And that's another thing for new athletic directors, or athletic directors who really don't worry about the budget. Understand what your purchasing policy is. If you have to get multiple quotes once you hit a threshold, if you go over $1,000 for whatever you're buying, you might have to show that you went with the best price. So you might need to get three quotes. If your threshold's 2,500, you know that, but those are all things that you want to know. And it brings up another very important point. If you're going to events where there's a fee, or you're going to purchase something that you want to get a quote first. And once you figure that out, make that quote and turn that into a requisition that you're going to buy. And then it gets converted into what's called a purchasing order. Do not come up and say, yeah, by the way, I just bought 30 dozen baseballs. You know, it's like 650 bucks. Yeah, we got to do something. That, then when you do that, a purchase order for it, it becomes what's called a confirming purchase order.
Or non.
That's when your business official is going to start giving your money away to the music department. All right. So they're not, you know, they're going to look and say, all right, you don't understand. I'm not going to give, you know, and you got to understand, it's more like a checking account, not a credit card, your
Right.
budget. So that's a very important thing, to get purchase orders in place before you purchase items.
Yeah, and let's stay on this for a second because people are going to start doing this. You know, and I remember the non-confirming purchase order letters that we used to get. That it's not a beg for forgiveness instead of asking for permission. You don't get away with that in budgetary terms, especially going back to anybody who's old enough to remember Roslyn. That we all have multiple auditors right now. These are things that you don't want to do because the bells go off. But let's take them on the process now of getting to, and I'm going to say it quick, but you'll explain it, of course. BRQs, PNDs, Bill, how does that build in to actually getting to a purchase order that, let's say, hits July 1?
So, if you're looking for, when you're going through items, what you're doing is you're getting basically an invoice on what it is. You're getting your quotes. And then from that, then you are determining who you are going to purchase from. So that creates what's called a requisition in the system. The requisition is then converted to a purchase order by the business office approving. All right. And then it goes out to the vendor and shows that there's a level of payment that they will receive no matter what.
Right, and that's we're going from the budget worksheet that you do in November, December, as you start building that part before it's actually adopted by the board in April or sometime in April.
Sure.
So, so I think what we're saying here is that I'm gonna request that money. I'm looking at July 1 though. I'm looking at 25, 26 right now.
Okay.
So my administrative person or myself, whoever's doing it, would enter all that information in, create a budget request. Once approved by the board and voted on by the public, they become, in at least in my district, PNDs, which are pending purchase
Yeah.
orders.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Actually, and then actually getting a number. So the number of the purchase order will be 26 dash one one
Yeah.
one
It'll
one
be the
one.
year plus
Year
whatever
plus
is in the
whatever. So
queue.
we're all consistent in what we do. Nobody really does it any differently in New York. But you did bring up a good point about the 400 codes, the contract service codes. And what would they be used for? What do we usually see in the contract service code area, the 400 codes?
Well, the part that I always say, and some people like it whenever everything's grouped into one budget code. As an athletic director, I liked it separate a little bit. In there, you would have officials' fees. I always had that as one specific 400 code, with a number like a 463. All right. Another one would be what my fees are for New York State, because you have to pay a fee for each team that you have. And I might tie that in with my fee at section 11 or whatever section you're in New York State, because you pay so much for the team. I'm not talking about the officials' fees, just strictly for the team
Dues.
to compete.
Yeah, dues. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have that. Then another thing you'll have in the 400 codes is reconditioning. If you have items that are going out, that come back, that'll be in your 400s. Also, so replacement of items is accepted as something that can go under reconditioning. So that's one of the things that people don't completely understand. If you have an item that you sent out for reconditioning and that item does not pass the test and it needs to be replaced, it is a reconditioning / replacement code. So that is replacement in kind. You can't send out 5 lacrosse helmets and through reconditioning put 30 in on the reconditioning line. You could put 5, whatever you put out, if they get rejected. But that's the thing. And then the part that I was talking about, like here, we do universal accounting code. So our 450s are supply codes, where some
Oh,
places you might see a 501 or a 501 or a
okay.
509.
Okay. See, that's
Yeah.
that's interesting about the reconditioning, Charlie, because most of us would think if we lose 10 helmets out of 70 we send, and we have to buy them out of 500. We have to pick them out of 5. We can actually budget in the 400 code and assume rejections
Yeah,
budget there. But let's talk about dollar to dollar. Do I guess the biggest thing for an AD is, aside from a specific item that you know the price of and you know what it's going to cost and you know the shipping and everything else, how do we budget? How do we put money? What's a rule of thumb for codes like the 400 codes, let's say, that deal with reconditioning or contract services or
sure. Yeah. Well, the one thing is like your exact numbers. Your numbers that are close to exact and still might be under are your equipment, your 200 codes. Those are usually exact. You might get the great sale, might come under, but those are more your exact. On your guesstimates, all right, you should have a pretty clear number of what the state is going to be on what the cost is going to be for your teams. What I always say, like a rule of thumb, is I'd like to add 2% to it because there might be a little bit of a change. Your officials' fees, the only advice that I would really say to people is unless your officials' fees are in contract negotiations, you usually on the back cover of your section books get an idea of what your officials' fees are going to cost for the following year. All right, you know what it is. So you come out and you can, you want to go over exactly what you have and then figure in maybe some additional monies for playoffs, depending on what you have with your teams. Some people look at whatever the officials' fees are and then add 2%. I think you really need to that code because it could be anywhere from 30,000 to 150,000 on your officials' fees, depending on size of your district. That's the one that, in relation, if you're going over a percentage, is probably one of the higher numbers that you're going to have.
Yeah.
So I would try to drill that down a little bit more. And then when it comes to supplies, the same way I talked a little bit about your uniforms, about your replacements. Everybody knows every year you're going to be replacing softballs, baseballs, lacrosse balls, volleyballs, all right, soccer balls. Everybody knows that, and footballs, all right. And if you're gonna, depending on what school district you are, if you're getting them laser engraved footballs, all right, because I've been through that. But you have an idea of what you're going to need each year, and those should be costs that you kind of figure out. And then there's areas where you think that you might be able to add a little bit more because of a need, but you're going to have to figure out an area to decrease a little bit. But again, you should have a pretty good understanding. The only problem that we have now is the cost of items has really gone through the roof. So on your supplies,
Yeah.
what you might be doing, the way to combat that is you budget for, 40 footballs. All right. When it comes up to the time when your budget is coming in, you might be purchasing 35 at the time because if the market's gone that crazy. But you still want to budget for whatever your highest amount
Sure.
is that you usually do.
So now there's other codes in that 400. I love the 400 code area, because it's my thing. You also have contractors that would come in and do, let's say, repair work, or maintenance work for you, like say a young equipment, not to sell their product or whatever, but a young
Yeah.
equipment come in and do their renovations. So
Mhm.
what's your approach to putting money away for them? They're under state contract, which for those that are listening and don't know, state contract is a negotiated price with New York State through OGS, and you can use them without having to get
Yeah,
bids.
your quotes are bid.
Your
Yeah.
quotes are bids, but we can talk about that later in a little more in depth. But how would you set aside money? What's your advice?
Well, what you really do is you look each year you're going to need to do some form of reconditioning in your weight room. Everybody should have weight rooms by now. All right. If you don't, then that's an understanding, and that's how you build it up through your equipment code through the years. So you would look at what your expected amount is per year. I would say you're going to bring them in usually twice a year. You figure out that number, and you might want to add an additional 10% to that, because what you're trying to figure out is you might have some equipment, same way that I talked about uniforms and that going out, you might have something in a way of equipment that you could get reconditioned, or you might want to build up your equipment code to get a new item. So you would look at what consistent numbers are each year to year. Plus, your vendors that all come in have an understanding that you can't, you know, hit it out of the park. But you would kind of keep consistent numbers. I will say one other thing that you might want to look at is when March, April comes around, business officials are already looking at what their numbers are, their guesstimates on if there'll be fund balance, if there's going to be money that's going to be going to reserves, if there's going to be a shortfall where they might say, look, I'm cutting everything off in February, so be ready for that. If for new ADs, try to get your spring needs purchased in the December, January time so that you have everything for spring, because not all business officials are going to understand sports. Same way ADs aren't going to understand the numbers, the business officials aren't going to understand sports. And they're the ones who control those checking accounts that I joke about there. So I would say, look at that. But if you're looking at that March, April time, That's another time that if I'm looking and say the way Jim was able to buy that $10,000 item for 9,000, maybe I've had massive savings in so many other areas. Maybe I have revenues that came in higher than expected. Maybe I'm trying now to put $3 or $4 million into reserves where I only wanted to put 2.5 million in reserves because of the way it is. That might be your time to have a discussion about different needs. There might be something that you might be looking at. There might be a
Mhm.
refurbishing of a field. There might be a refurbishing of your weight room. Something like that is something that you might want to do. But now don't, and also everybody now don't run to your business officials now in March and April. Yeah, Charlie told me to come in and that. But it's something that you look at because the business office is looking to see if there are projects to expend funds that we could do. So
Mhm.
just
Yeah,
something to remember.
occasionally they do want to work with us, so that's not a bad
I
thing.
do. Hey, I'll always work with the ADs. I know what that job's like. And when the scoreboard goes out and everybody looks at you because they magically think you've now become an electrical repairman, 2,000 people at a football game and they all stare at you. It's like,
It's so funny.
the business official doesn't get that. I go to the football game and I turn around, I look at the AD and I go, what's going on with that board? So but I know the way the job is, so they're definitely here to help.
It's so funny you say that because the guy that's on this call with us, Greg Warren,
Yeah.
he had the exact same problem. Greg, you want to tell that story since you're listening in?
The scoreboard.
Scoreboard story.
I have a scoreboard that was built in 1984. It breaks down every year. I mean, literally went out and held like coax communication cables together during a game, keep it running. This year it collapsed. And, it's just like we had to turn it a hardwired 1984 system into a wireless system to get it to keep working. And it was, I called the company. It was Nevco. The guy was great, but they have like one guy and they call him, the institutional specialist. Like, it's like they send you paid for a new controller. Says use this code, didn't work. He goes, nope, that's not going to work on your model. Let me go. I got a special Excel here that'll tell you what code to use.
The point is, here it is, Greg's trying to get a new scoreboard for years, and this is a place where they don't get it. This is a showcase. It's like the one thing that people do see more than
Yeah.
anything when they drive on a campus is a scoreboard. And if you're not going to invest any money into it, but I just thought that was funny. You mentioned that, Charlie, and then Greg happened to be on with his story because it's just a head shaker up there sometimes. But
Yeah, you've gone from hiring the best coach, and that was your role as athletic director, to the person who better have some electrical tape in the back to
Yeah.
tie everything on, and also with rubber gloves so you don't electrocute yourself. Because
Yeah.
if you do, yeah, they'll
it's like
maybe the ambulance will take you, or maybe it's still there waiting for the kid in football get injured and they just cart you off.
It's,
So
it's like it's like Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. My
yes,
my dad's got a cool set of tools. We can fix this. I can
yeah,
fix it.
yeah.
So just circling back into the budgetary things. Um, Tell everybody what the term blanket purchase order means.
Well, there are different vendors that you will use from year to year that take care of certain items for you that are they have already won a bid or they already have the contract for you. So what you do is in the start of the year, the July 1, and actually the thing that's funny, Jim touched on this a little bit. Once a school budget is passed, which is always that third Super Tuesday, in May, the systems that you have allow you to create purchase orders for the following year. So they're done in May and June and they roll out July 1. And with relationships you have, you can let people know this is coming to you, or you could show them a picture of what it is July 1. So you get the ball rolling. But a blanket PO is something that you establish with the dollar amount that you're going to be using from time to time throughout the course of the year. But you put it in place first at the beginning of the year so you don't get a confirming purchase order. Examples of that might be reconditioning, it might be awards that you get, and it might be different small types of things as it relates to uniforms or other small supply items.
Interesting about that too, because a blanket purchase order and why most of them appear in, at least in my district when I was here, all my blankets were in the 400 codes.
Yes.
And you mentioned this earlier, Charlie, because it was transferable. Because not that we don't want to use the term padding your budget. You're not padding your budget. You're using an increase in your budget that fits the market. So if there's a 10% increase in pricing and we don't, and one of the mistakes that a lot of ADs make is they don't include shipping costs in a lot of their things. And that's a real problem with purchasing agents when when that isn't done. Um, but having that money in a blanket means, like you said, you don't have to create a purchase order every time you want something. It's one PO and they chop down on it. And when your administrative person gets a bill and it's more than what you have in the budget, well, you can bring some money in from another code. And usually those places occur with, like you said, officials, dues, reconditioning, supplies. So it falls into that category. Um, you made another good mention there, Charlie, of in May, when the budgets are approved, you can start letting people know. Do you guys work with letters of intent?
Yeah, we'll do that. But quite honestly, like the only time that we're really using letters of intent, we use letters of intent whenever we're doing big construction projects.
Right,
That's whenever we're doing it. We redid our just one to us. We redid our science wing, and it was a bond project. It was a small one, like $3.4 million. And one of the groups had a $1.6 million contract. They were going to be approved. It wasn't official yet, but in order to get the ball rolling, they had other supplies they wanted. So we sent a letter of intent to them about what exactly the bid was, what the contract was, what we're looking at, so that they can get the ball rolling on their end. On the one that you are speaking about now, you actually, instead of a letter of intent, we show them what a requisition that's being created
exactly.
late May and June, where it's showing the July 1st purchase order date. So you're showing them where you're like, look, this is already planned. This purchase order is already in place. The money was approved by the taxpayers. Our budget holds this. And once you have that purchase order, that is a binding contract for a district that they must pay when goods and services are delivered. So usually in that, no matter when it's given to them, or when you're telling them in May and June, and it's a purchase on July 1, they'll start to move forward. The only thing that we say on that is they have to understand you can't get paid until July 1 or a later date. You can't magically pay them before this purchase order is supposed to go out. So
Correct.
I hope that helps answer that part of
No,
it.
it does. It's a great answer to it. If I'm again talking to a new AD or a newer AD, we've talked a lot. We've given them a lot of information on that. But what's aside from the relationship with the business official, how important is a relationship with a purchasing agent in the district?
Oh, it's a strong one because the purchasing agent is gonna know what the bid process is. And then in your areas, you have cooperative bids, whether it be through BOCES, a state contract, a federal contract. That purchasing agent is made aware of all these, where you might be saying, use the example of getting the baseballs off of this and you're going for this certain type. There might be a different contract that's out there that, where they are NOxie still stamped and that, but you could get it at a different price and a better price. So that and what happens is whenever you purchase off of bids, the vast majority of time is shipping is included in whatever their bid price is.
Right.
So the purchasing agent is going to be aware of these things. It's just like if you were going over and you wanted to get an awareness of something, you're reading a book, that purchasing agent is the book. They're the one who knows all of these different areas that you can go to.
So we're getting into some real nitty gritty. So if I'm talking to the purchasing agent and I get my three bids. Do I have to take the lowest bid?
It's the lowest responsible bidder.
Lowest responsible bidder.
Yeah.
If can I, all right, so here's a conundrum. I want a uniform that has a 3/4 inch inseam. The lowest bid is giving me a 1/4 inch inseam. And I need to have a 3/4 inch inseam because durability, things like that. They're $10 more per uniform. Can I select that uniform?
You just brought up a really good point. The one thing whenever you're putting something out there as the athletic director, you want to be as specific as possible.
Mhm.
All right, where you're putting down everything that is needed. If the numbers have to be, first of all, your color has to be very specific. Your number size has to be specific. If you want an inseam, you make sure that that's on the bid that's going out. Anything and everything that you want. And one of the things I used to do way back in my hot dog days, I would have everything written out with exactly what I wanted, and then in bold letters, no substitutes. So the other bidder can't come in and just like you were saying, they can give you a different inseam, they could give you a different cut, they could give you a different material. When you put that in as no substitutes in that, then it sounds like the person that you might get, you're saying they're $10 more, they're actually not, because the other person that low bid on them is not a qualified bidder. So
Yes,
their
there you go.
price then might become the lowest price, but the specificity is a very important part of the game of being an athletic director. You need to be as specific as possible. Same as if you're talking to that purchasing agent, when I bring back that part with the baseballs, or it could be anything, you understand that the baseballs have to have a Noxie stamp on it or else they're not. I don't know. I've been out for a little while, so maybe it's changed, but they have to have that stamp on it in order to be able to be used. The purchasing agent might be looking at another company that doesn't have that stamp. So now you've just bought 30 dozen useless baseballs. You're gonna have a signing day. You sell them back. That's what you're gonna do. So that's one of the things I talk about is be specific as possible. Also, the other part, whoever the business official is in the district, they are very involved with safety, security, and the insurance rates that you pay. So make sure that whatever you're getting is the best out there from a safety perspective, and make that business person aware of that. If they're looking for a low bid and it's not safe, uh, you know, just imagine you put a student in a helmet that is something that's approved for a middle school student and they're on varsity. Let me tell you something. The difference in the price of that helmet is going to be a hell of a lot less than what the legal fees that business official is going through for months, possibly years, whenever that insurance case comes up and they get subpoenaed whenever, to go to trial. So that's just another thing to think about.
It's so funny because the biggest things that we argue about sometimes is equipment that's safe and why is it so expensive? It's so expensive because they know they can price it there because they know you need it in order to keep the athletes safe and reduce your risk. So great points though, Charlie. And on another thing on that, let's say I have a vendor that is not in our system and they have good product and we want to get them involved. What do we do with those guys?
Well, whenever you have a vendor like that, there's different things. There's what's called like the I-9 forms, different things that they have to fill out. That's something as an athletic director, you don't need to get involved with. You basically, the way that works is you speak to somebody in your accounts payable, or you're a business official, or your purchasing agent, and you make them aware of the vendor, because then they'll do the research to make sure they're legitimate. And then they will go out and get the proper paperwork sent to them, which those people need to complete and send back. And then they will go on and be a qualified uh, person to order from, and they'll come up in your system. In this day and age of technology, every person gets the same way that you have a purchase order with a number on it, you have an employee with an ID number on it, you have a student with an ID on it. Your vendors have numbers, all right, in the system in there. So you can't purchase something from them until they're in your system. That that goes, and that's a simple thing that usually does not take a long time, when provided that it's a quality vendor that you're using.
So I have my I-9, my W-9, whatever I collect, I get the vendor in place. What if that vendor is, the vendor I need is it's the only place I can get it is from him. What do I need to do at that point for her?
Well, then you're coming up and you threw that little softball to me about sole source letters. All right, high arc, yeah, I'm not
IR.
fast pitch. Um, what happens is if you're purchasing something and only one person is able to provide it. Now, that can't be this magic football, all right? There is not sole source for an item like that. But there might be a specific item that you're using in a individualized sport that they're the only ones who supply it. You get what's called a sole source letter. That means when you have sole source, there's nothing on three bids or anything like that because nobody else can bid on it because it's an individual item. So you just have what's called a sole source letter that these vendors, they all know, and they'll send you that sole source letter, and that goes over in the process where you're making a requisition.
And I know this happens because, we all kind of know, the system. Favorite vendor, and we call that vendor up. They're really good to us. They get the product to us quickly at a good price. We need three quotes, and that vendor supplies three quotes.
No, no, they didn't. They can't.
They can't, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. There's no shell companies or corporations that they should be very, very, very careful of
yeah.
something like that. It's
I say it this way. Like, here's the easiest way that I say to somebody, and it's the same part that I talk about when coaches and that. So what you're going to do is you're going to jeopardize whatever your salary is. It could be
yes.
on the low end from $80,000 to $200,000. You're going to jeopardize, your family's income on trying to make somebody else happy. It's a business. There's friendships, and I'm very lucky to have tons of friends. I always say I'm getting older. I'm trying to downsize friends, some of them, but you have tons of friends in this business because you do things a certain way, which is the right way. Um, any true friend who's a vendor is not going to jeopardize that friendship by you going to somebody else. If they are, then they really aren't a true friend, and they're not the appropriate vendor for you. So
And
they might be other people that do bid on an item that they know, which is a quality business. But again, they're not going to be something where they're making up these crazy companies. And why in the world would you jeopardize your career on something like that?
we say these things because, we want to warn people, and, we also need to know that we deal with a lot of vendors that are going to offer us a lot of things.
Yeah.
Well, how much are we allowed to accept from a vendor?
Yeah,
And
you're going to see, every school district has policies on what is acceptable. Usually it's like $75. Anything
$35, yeah, of
exceeds that, that's something that has to be reported. You can still accept it, it just has to be reported.
course.
But the thing is, if you're going out and you're grabbing dinner with them or something, that's one thing. If you're going out or somebody wants to take you on a trip, I never go on the trips. Again, why jeopardize what you're doing over that? And there's a lot of great people. And there's other things that they sponsor that you could go to, which is the legal way to go, but there's no need for it,
Don't you? And
I'll tell you different stocks to play. That'll
yeah, I mean,
save
and
money.
this isn't really, we're not talking about building a budget, but we talk about relationships. And it's important that we have good relationships with our vendors,
Yes.
because if we need something in a pinch, an emergency comes up, we want to have a reliable person we can call that we've already set aside money in our blanket purchase order for to come in and fill that gap. And it's enticing because you're made to feel important because you're being wined and dined, or given a gift or tickets to a ball game or something like that as thank you for the business. Listen, your first responsibility is to the taxpayer and the children, or children first and then taxpayers second, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And I just think of an ethics standpoint, building a budget is an ethical procedure. You're not looking to um, take money. I'm not going to say the word steal. It's silly to say we're not stealing from one budget to another, but we want to protect our turf the proper way. So ethics is a critical piece about what we do. And Charlie, I know we're getting near the hour, and I know you've got a job to do, and everybody else has one too. But you had some things that you'd written down earlier. Did we touch on those things, Charlie, or do you want
Yeah,
to?
I mean, really, I just wanted people to have a better understanding of what the budgets are. The other part that I would say, especially to new athletic directors, is find out whenever you're doing budgeting, find out what the school district's philosophy is as it relates to teams, especially at the middle school level. Um, because you might have 60 kids trying out and you got two teams. You might think that 60 kids trying out for two teams, this is great. You're going to have two solid teams. They might come to you and say, we want to have a third team. And that's when you're looking, going, the athletic director coaching you is going, are you kidding me? With the AB format, I got 60 kids trying out. I got 8 kids who could play a sport. You want me to spread them over 3 teams? You're going to see it come down to you in the future in varsity. They're not going to know what the heck they're doing. Um, you got to take that out of the equation. You look and see what the philosophy is of the school district. Let me tell you, if superintendent and the Board of Education are saying we want 3 teams, guess what? You're out there searching for that third coach, and you're going to have the 3 teams. If you want to come up with an idea where you have a very strong intramural program, you better have a very solid plan and not have those kids disappear. But the reason why I say it is you want to know what the philosophy is, because if you are bringing a new team, you better make damn sure that you budgeted for it. So that's something that you want to make sure. Or if you haven't budgeted for it, have those numbers available. So whenever they tell you you're going to put that third team in, you say, okay, well, here's what the cost is. It's not budgeted. And then you're going to see that business official and me go, well, why are you making me transfer money? But it's their philosophy. So just know what the idea is of the Board of Education and superintendent, because then it gives you great understanding. And if you're new and they tell you that third team, you're putting that third team in, but just be prepared for it, and it also helps you from a standpoint of out there. The other part that I put in is marketability. In sports, you got to understand when you go into the meetings with the business official or anybody that you're there, you are providing a service which probably gets the best bang for the buck in a school district budget. And you need to understand that. You need to promote it. You need to promote your scholar athlete teams. You need to promote success. You need to promote change. You might have a team that didn't win a game, all of a sudden is winning 2 games. There's improvement. And you promote these things as much as you can, and it makes your budget process actually go a lot better. Because I'll tell you, when I was athletic director at Sayville, going into a budget meeting, I really pretty much got most of what I wanted, but there was always a plan in place for it. But it's what you look, the more you promote, the more of an understanding there is. And bang for the buck, you're able to put a team in for $10,000, $15,000 where they're giving unbelievable success stories to these kids. You tell me what staff member you're going to hire for $10,000, $15,000 in there. So that was probably just the last thing I wanted to say, and don't want to preach, but again, just to make sure and not get caught.
No, this is so important, and Charlie, I think that's you said it's 1% of a school budget is most athletic budget, 1 to 2% is the most in a school budget, and yet the bang for the buck is 10 times. It's worth 10 times, 20 times that, because when you drive on campus, what's the first thing you see? The stadium.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. And and what's represent the signage, whether it's the signage, the branding, things like that. We see it all the time that everybody's conscious of that now, how important the brand is and trademarking the brand and so on and so forth. So, but
Yeah.
Charlie, this was great. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to have someone that sat in both chairs um, for such a long time. It wasn't like you just picked this up yesterday and said you're going to do this. The fact that you've been doing the business part of it for better part of maybe 10 years now, right?
Yeah, that just means I'm really good and old, Jim. Yeah, like 20 years AD and over 10 is business. So
You're coloring your hair well, my
no,
friend.
yeah, it's
Coloring your
well,
hair well.
that's a gene pool thing. Got lucky.
So listen, we'll say our goodbyes. I'll get out there to see you. I don't drink, so
That's all right.
we'll go get some pumpkins instead of wine, I guess, if I come out of the North Fork. But
That's
I
good.
loved having you on today, Charlie, and for the AD Vantage Point, um, YouTube, Spotify. Um, we'll be back again next month with another podcast. Check out the 3 Minute AD on YouTube. And we're looking forward to the national conference in Austin next month. For those of you that are going, we hope to see you out there. And don't forget to register for the New York State Conference in March in Saratoga. It's 4 months away, believe it or not, and we've got a great lineup set up for you. So thanks again, Charlie. God bless you all. All the
Okay.
best, and have a great winter season.
Thank you for the invite, Jim. Take care.
Anytime, pal.